Hello, and welcome to Our Moment, the Literary Podcast. It is your host, Exquisite. I'm so happy to have you here today. How are you doing? How's life going? And let's get started into the show. Before we get started with anything, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening to the ad at the beginning of this. If you are listening to this episode anywhere that is not on YouTube, that really helps the show grow, and I really appreciate you guys listening. Well, on to today's episode. I would just like to start, but I keep saying like to start. I think I've said it perhaps 3 times, but Merry Christmas. I hope you guys are all having a lovely, lovely holiday season. It feels so weird for me to be saying Merry Christmas because as of the day I'm recording this, it is not Christmas, like, at all. Like, it's definitely like not even Thanksgiving yet. But Merry Christmas when you're hearing this. Well, it's still a week away from Christmas, but the episode after this will be the episode that's after Christmas. And you guys, I'm like gonna get all emotional. We're finally at our part 4 breakdown. I have no guest today. I figured it's part 4. It's the end of the book. What more could y'all want but to see me? To listen to me. So yeah, it's just gonna be me talking about the book today. Some preamble. I know I only did 1 episode before this because I thought it'd be kind of clever. There are 13 knights, and I was like, what if there are, of the round table, and I was like, what if there are 13 episodes about Legendborn, like, that are me talking about the book. So next week will be like a full wrap-up episode where we fully get into like, oh, that was Legendborn, and that's what that book was about, you know? But today, so once again, it's just me, just like when we did part 1 breakdown. So part 4 breakdown is going to be just me. And my mother just told me, shout out to my mom. I'm probably with her now when she's listening to this. No, I will be with her later on this week. Or I'm with her now, I can't remember. I can't remember. I don't know yet. I can't see the future. My mom just told me she got the book. So you know what? That's a win for the Our Moment Literary Podcast. My mommy is listening to this. That's so exciting. Hi, Mom. But yes, so we're finally going to do a part 4 breakdown. And it's kind of really emotional for me because we've been doing this every week, y'all. This has been a long time coming where we just kind of talk with each other about the end of this first debut novel. And it's really like part 4 for me is the best part of the entire novel. Like, I'm not even going to hold y'all. I'm not going to joke. Part 4, Splinter, is the greatest thing ever written to me. Ever written that I've read this year. And I know a lot of people may not agree with that, but haha, they're not on this podcast. It's just me. So I get to make my own decisions about what we listen to and what we read. So yeah, so it's really special to me, and usually our breakdowns, we just get right into it, but once again, here's your all brand spoiler warning, whatever. If you hear the pages of the book turn, good. I want you to hear it because I just want you to know I'm just like y'all. So where we left off, Bree has definitely ran away from Nick. Nick has told Bree that he wants her to be his. Like, he's like, for what it's worth, basically, I would have chose you, and she's running off because she can't deal with it. And everybody is trying to contact her. She's blocked Nick's number. She's blocked Sayre's number, William, Greer, Whitty. She's blocking them all because she's so in pain over finding out that her mom was just an accident, and now she knows that Selwyn's mom is involved too, and she finds out her mom didn't pursue the order in its war. Her mom didn't share her root craft. And she's like, the least that she can do after defying her mom in so many ways is finally follow in her footsteps. And it's like, Bree, no. And so she's like, the next few days, she's actually studying for class and doing what good students do. And Alice is like, yo, chill. Like, what's up with you? And she's like, nothing. And so then Alice, finally they're at lunch, and Alice is like, hey, so you need a dress. And she's like, I'm not going back there. And she's like, I got a C minus on my English test. I really need to focus on that. And I was like, a C minus? You've never scored below an A in your life. Well, I say A. An A in English in her life. And she's like, yeah, but I'm just not gonna go to the ball. And Alice is like, it's about this group. And she's like, dude, you have got to go to that gala. Like, I got Charlotte's dresses. You're gonna be so beautiful. You have got to go. And Bree is just not feeling it. And Alice is like, well, you stop talking to your hot dude. Like, all of this. And Bree's like, no, I don't want to go. I'm just a zombie. And finally, Alice is like, you know what you need? You need homeostasis. And she's like, you just biologied me. And Bree is kind of like not, she doesn't want to hear this, right? Our girl is sad right now. She doesn't have her mom. She doesn't have Nick anymore because she's got to push him away, at least in her eyes. Like, she's all kind of discombobulated right now. And then she gets a call on Friday, and it's from her father. And we're so used to getting calls from her dad, y'all. And her dad's like, so what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I don't have class till 10. And he's like, come have breakfast with me. And she's like, yeah, right. I would if I could. And he's like, oh, I'm being so for real. Bring your books. And I'm downstairs. Come have breakfast with me. He's like, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I'm in the area. And she's like, absolutely not. It's a 4-hour drive. What are you doing here? And he's like, come have breakfast with me. And so he takes her to Waffle House. And y'all, my southern heart, I almost want to cry. I haven't been to Waffle House in so long. I need to go just get some Waffle House, actually. Maybe that's what I'll do. Not tonight. Anyway, this is not about me. He takes her to Waffle House. And she's seeing her dad. And she's kind of like so full of emotion. She's avoiding his eyes. And he buys her some hash browns. He's like, you're going to talk to me. And she's like, you're bribing me? And he's like, yep, because it works. You are going to talk to me. So she's like trying to hold back her tears. And he's like, Bree, you can come home if you want. Like, you don't have to be here anymore. You can come home. But he's like, you're not going to leave if the dean scared you. And Alice has told him, because once again, Alice is always in contact with her dad. And I know I ragged on Alice. And my mom was like, I think Alice is a good friend. She needed to call her dad. And yes, she did need to call her dad. And I do be ragging on Alice, but I can admit she's a good friend. She cares about her. And so we find out, like, so her dad's like, don't run off because of Dean. And Bree's like, her dad never got a chance to go to college. Mr. Matthews didn't go. And she's like, maybe he didn't go because he had his own dean that was bad to him. So then finally she like gathers up the courage and she's like, hey, did mom ever talk to you about grandma? And she's like, and her dad is like, well, not really. She had a lot of pain from her grandma dying. And he was like, before me and your mom met, her mom was already dead. And she was like, she held in that pain. And he was like, it did, and her grief about her grandma, about her own mom dying, came out in the way she raised Bree. She was very anxious and protective over Bree. And Bree's like, I didn't see that. I thought that's how all parents were. And he was like, no, she was always scared of you getting kidnapped. She needed all that. And she's like, that's part of the reason I got you the therapist immediately. Because he didn't want Bree to turn out like her mom, as anxious and stressed. And he was like, every fight that y'all had was her like worrying about you. And if you guys could hear, I'm getting emotional because Bree was always stressed out about her mom fighting with her. And it's like, she just, she didn't know how else to protect her in that way, you know? And it's not fair to Bree, and it's not fair to her mom, but they've got this trauma. And Bree, she like looks at her hands and she's crying, and she's like, my mom knew what this felt like. And her mom knew like what it felt like to lose a mother. And she just wasn't ready to let her go. So then basically, and he's like, you are ready. And she was ready. She would have known you ready. She just wasn't ready. Bree was ready. Her mom, Faye, was not ready. And she's like, okay. And he's like, I love her and I miss her, but she's got something for you. And so he gives her like this bracelet. Because he said he was going through the closet and he was thinking about donating clothes. And he's like, it was really hard to even think about it because, like, for him, if he donates the clothes, it becomes real. And he's like, bringing himself to do was the hardest part. But in her closet was, was her Bible first. And he gives Bree her mom's a Bible, and Bree's like, my mom carried this everywhere. And in the Bible, she had wrote, Lord, she's already stronger than I ever was. I worry her challenges will be just as powerful. I worry that I'm running out of time. Please protect her and give me the strength to let her go. And Bree says that family Bibles are also this kind of like always seemed mystical in a way. So in the Bible, still smells like her mom. And it's just emotionally. And then her dad gives her this bracelet. And he's like, you need to open it when you get back to your room. And then he says something like really, really, like, at least to me, very profound. He's like, kiddo, you can study hard, but that's only if you want to do it. No matter what you do, you got to live your life. You got to be in the world. That's what she would want you to do. And he's like, don't make your life about the loss. Make it about the love. And Bree, when she gets back to her room, she's like pondering this. Like, make it about the love. Make it about the love. And she opens the bracelet. And the first thing she hears is her mother's voice. And she almost breaks down. She's like, Mommy. And it was like, I read that. And it was like, I had to pause. I was like, oh my goodness. Anyway, she says, Mommy. And then she gets swept up in this memory. And they're on a fairground, and her mom like pulls her to the side, and before they go in, she's like, hey, I need to talk to you. And it is a young Bree. She may be about like 6 or 7. And she's like, I need to talk to you. And she's like, I got a speech to tell you, and it's for somebody else, but I need you to listen to me. And she's like, okay, I can. And she's like, okay, just look me straight in the eyes. And then the first line of her speech says, Bree, if you're seeing this again, it means I'm not with you. And then young Bree is like stressed out, right? She's like, oh my gosh, what? And her mom apologizes for the pain that she's in. She apologizes that she caused it. And she's like, I hope this whole charm bracelet comforts you. And she said, you can't stop sneaking in my room and play with it at the moment, so I'm telling your dad to give it to you, but he'll probably give it to you a little later because, And then she tells her their history. She's like, we're descended from root crafters. We borrow the power from our ancestors, and it's different. And she says, usually I would be the one to help you with your root craft, just like your grandmother helped me with mine, and her mother helped her with hers. But things are different for you than they are for me. As far as all protections know, if a child has a branch of root, that gift manifests early, maybe 5 or 6 with accidental. That's what happened to her mom. That didn't happen for Bree, so she thought maybe Bree wouldn't have the craft because she had a friend look at Bree and she was like, Bree doesn't have the craft aura, so she thought maybe it had passed her over, right? And she's like, it's not a bad thing if you don't have the root in our family. She said, but just in case, if you're seeing this, I'm making a plan B, just in case you do have it. Because all the women in their family, their root craft is special and they keep it a secret. Because other root crafters users wouldn't like what they have. And basically this is her telling Bree we have blood craft, which we know because Patricia was like, somebody bound this magic to your line a while ago. So then she's like, Bree, if you're hearing the second time, then you already know what I'm talking about. And she's like telling her the abilities, the heightened sense of smell, hearing, taste, about root. Certain enchantments that work on other people don't work on her. Basically telling her all the stuff that we know now. And she's like, these abilities are fight or flight for us. So the first will allow you to flee. And if you need to stand your ground, you can fight. That's what it's for. And she's like, the reason that they don't tell other root class is because the power was taken forever and not just borrowed. Somewhere in their bloodline, someone bound the magic to them. And she's like, I don't know who did it. Your grandmother doesn't know. And the last person who knew where it came from died in childbirth. So she couldn't pass it on to her daughter. So basically the daughter lived to continue their line, but she had died, so she couldn't actually tell her what happened. She said they call it bloodcraft because it's a curse. The universe will come calling for payment. And she said the cost for their family is that the power can only live in one daughter at a time. And she's like, maybe it's because all that power burns us out. I don't know. But none of us have very long with our mothers. Each mother's final act is to pass these abilities to her daughter. Which is, she's like, she knows that if you're hearing this now, I know you have them. And she's like, and I know if you have them, I'm gone. And I know you're thinking, but it's not your fault I left you, just like it wasn't my fault my mother left me. I know you have those feelings now, but don't let them sour inside you. Let the pain be a part of you. But no, that's not all you are. That's what I'm trying to do. She's like, it's confusing, but I'm right here. And it's okay. And her mom's like, I got involved with some people. She's like, there was one time I saw something happen at my school and I fought back. And she's like, I don't regret fighting back. And she's like, I don't think it was a mistake. But she said the only thing that she thinks was a mistake was that all the anger she felt and guilt she felt about her own mother dying, she feels upset about letting it soak in and get to her so much. She's like, I'm trying to work on that. And then she says, I want you to know that you are the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. And you're already more of a warrior than I ever was. And I believe with all my heart that if you want to, you can change the world. And then she's like, if the time comes, don't be scared. I want you to fight back. Take risks and follow your heart. And then she said, she looks up to the person behind her and she goes, she won't remember this. And like the person was like, yeah, apparently. And so then all the mage flame around the bracelet dies out. And Bree's like looking around, she got tears. She just got this message from her mother and she's like, she knows what she's got to do. So she goes straight to the cemetery and she's called Patricia and Mariah. And she basically is like, I'm sorry for the way things left. I'm apologizing for my behavior. I need to talk with y'all. And she's like, I found my mother's box. She tells them the whole truth about all the bloodcraft and everything. And Patricia's like, I don't know if I can help you exactly. And Bree's like, I just need an ancestor to come and talk to me and tell me what's going on. And she said, I don't want to get lost in the past. I want to embrace it and understand it. Which message, that's a message. I underlined it. I highlighted. That's a message. Don't get lost in the past. You just need to understand what happened. And Mariah's like, I can't promise you who you'll hear from, but you'll hear from somebody. Somebody's going to come. So they're all sitting in a triangle and she's like, okay, Bree, you need to focus on the love for your mother and make a thread. And she said, now imagine it stretching back to your grandmother and grandmothers before them. And she keeps getting stopped. And she's getting stopped by that wall. Do you remember the wall I mentioned in the beginning? The wall that keeps after Bree together? She wants to imagine it being strong and tough and nothing can take it down. And she's like, I have to take this wall down now. I can't keep it up anymore because it's detrimental to me now, actually. So she takes the wall down and she says that all the layers, she unwinds them all. All the parts of her that she calls after Bree, she takes them down and she says she unwinds one strand for her mother, one strand for her father, and one for her. And she says she unravels all the rage and she lets it become a part of her, but not all of her. Until there's no more before and there's no more after. I am her and she is me because there's no more after Bree. And then she's like, okay, Mariah's like, I'm going to help you. And she's like, I hear something. I hear someone and she's coming. And she's got a lot to say and a lot to do. And then you hear a voice that's like, took you long enough. And it's her grandmother. And her grandmother's like, I don't have the answers for you, but I can hold the door open for an older mother. And she definitely like curses. And her grandma like finds a way to elbow her in the ribs. She gets smacked. And she's like, how did she just slap me? And Mariah's like, I didn't know. She's like, not all mediums get possessed, but you are a medium. So congrats. Welcome Club Medium. And she's like, okay. And she can like feel her grandmother, right? And so then Patricia says that it's the bloodcraft. The original nature is spelled. You have to speak to the ancestor and know. And as your mother said, you'll need to go back further than your grandmother. Your mother practiced wildcraft, which is a completely different branch, and it's different power. So as a medium, Bree's power is wound so tightly with death, and her family's bloodcraft is triggered by death. So she thinks maybe they're more intertwined than her, and tied together in special ways than they would have been to everybody else. And that's also why we can kind of relate back to what Bree's mother told her. She's like, hey, you're different from me. So she's like, why didn't the branches manifest when your mom died? That's when Mariah asked her. She's like, your mom died, you should have got power. And Bree's like, that's not. She's like, that's kind of my fault, because when after Bree created, when the trauma made after Bree, she walled her up, and after Bree also has her powers. So once again, remember when I said on the cover we're seeing after Bree? After Bree has her powers. So, and then Patricia's like, sometimes our brain protects us until we're ready. So she takes her grandma inside of her, and she's like, she's gonna be a lighthouse. So she's guiding the older mother to come speak with me. And then she's like, her grandma is so funny. Like, she's calling her out. She's like, the oldest lady. And then Mariah was like, hey, before you leave us officially, you need to know that the hardest part about being a medium is closing the doors once they're open. There's a lot of unsettled spirits. Eager ones will look for ways in. And she's like, you're much more open to your ancestors now. And listen, this is the South. There are a lot of unsettled black folk on the ground, right? So she goes to sleep, and her grandmother's asleep in the back of her head. And she's kind of like, oh, I know what I need to do. I know, like, my purpose and everything. I need to get to work. And so she texts Alice. She's like, Alice, I need you to get Charlotte. And they help her get dressed, because guess what? Bree is going to that ball that she said she was going. And she spent some time taking care of her hair. She's like, I feel rejuvenated. I feel more supported, more me than I've ever been in months. And so she's wearing this super nice dress. And it's a gorgeous gown. It's like red, it's fitting, it's shiny, it's shimmering, and she looks excellent. In my head, she's got this super nice red dress on, and I can clearly imagine it. So she walks in, and she opens the door, and she's like, all the waiters in here are black, and everybody is black, and so that aren't the people. Everybody that is serving are not white people, essentially. And she's like, ooh, that's a little ugh. So she gets in, and she sees a bunch of people, and she's like, Nick had said to expect Legendborn and vassal families from all the lines, and even from Europe, all in attendance to hear an update on the attacks, and watch as the current class of scions pick their squires. And they're all arranged by the colors of their lines. So you see, like, lime green, you see, like, yellow, all of that. And so she walks in, and everybody's, like, following her. They're, like, looking at her, and she can feel that Selwyn is, like, staring at her, right? And then Felicity pops up, and she's like, oh my gosh, Nick is going to lose his entire mind when he sees you. And boom, here's Nick. And he just says hi, and he's like, you look amazing. And she's like, and she looks at him, she's like, you look like a newly recruited secret agent. He's like, yeah. And basically they're flirting. And he's like, so we got stuff to talk about, but not yet. And so they all get seated, and he's like, look, we'll talk later. And Bree's like, well, he says, you don't text, you don't call. And Bree's kind of like, yeah, I know, I didn't mean to shut you out. He's like, look, we'll talk about it later. And she just wanted to say her, like, final goodbye, because she's at this point, she's like, I don't have anything to do with the order, but I need to finish up what I started here, basically. So they're sitting at the table, and then they're, like, dancing. There actually ends up being a dance. Well, not yet. So she's talking, Vaughn's there, and Nick is like, I told Vaughn to go all the way on the other side of the room because I don't like him. And Bree's like, he's a good fighter. And Nick is like, no. And then finally Evan pops up and he's like, hey, no drama at this table. Let's try to get the waiters to serve us some alcohol, even though we're under 21. And he's like, then let's rank everybody here, right? So Evan is like being cheery and all that stuff. And she's like, yeah, Bree, you're a 10. Yep. And Nick's like, agreed. And it's just so funny. So it's like, yeah. And so then Nick asks her for a dance. And they're dancing or whatever. And it's cute. And then she feels eyes on her. And it's super aggressive eye. And guess who it is? It's Isaac Sorensen. And I have not said that name before. Isaac Sorensen is Lord Davis's King's Mage. He's the most powerful King's Mage of his generation. Like, he's basically as powerful as what older Cell, who we know is extremely powerful, will be when he grows up. And so Isaac is like, Nicholas, look, your dad wants to see you now. And he's like, fine. And he's like staring at Bree, and Bree's kind of stressed until Cell walks up and Cell like grabs him. But before this, he's like, oh, you're the little Unideg girl. And it's like, oh, yikes. Because he said it kind of like it was a slur. Like, you know, obviously he doesn't want her to be there. And in the back of her mind, her grandmother is like, who is this man? And she's like, it's a bad man, Grandma. And her mom's like, I don't like his eyes. Her grandma's like, I don't like his eyes. And she's like, I don't either. But then Cell comes up and he's like, hey, Master Isaac, I'm going to take Bree for a little dance. And we find out that Isaac taught Selwyn. So Bree and Cell are dancing and they're talking. And he's like, I'm surprised you're letting me lead. And then someone gives her a good bit of advice. He said, hey, don't ever look a Master Merlin directly in the eyes. Master Isaac is more... Mesmer is more powerful than mine, and it's quicker. So don't look him in the eyes. And so they're like talking and they're dancing. And then she starts asking questions. She's like, hey, can you use ether to manipulate objects that exist? And he's like, it will cause a headache, but not over the long. And she's like, what about all over these years? And she's like, he's like, no, that's not possible. So I don't think any Merlin could sustain that much effort over years. And he said to lock a memory so that it requires an ether key to open, it'd be like unheard of. And then he looks at her and he's like, well, everything that comes to you is unheard of. And it's like cute or whatever. And then he's like, will you always be the mystery girl? And she's like, probably. And then he asks to help her. And he's like, or would Nicholas feel left out again? And she's like, that's not fair. But anyway, they're going this back and forth. And then she smells him. And she's like, your magic smells way better than your cologne. He goes, my magic? And then she's like, you can smell my magic? And she's like, yeah, I can smell everything. And then he calls her remarkable. And y'all, it's so cute. I literally can't take it. Anyway. And Nick is watching them dance. And he is mad. And I think someone kind of likes that he's mad. You know, whatever. So then they start getting to the announcements. And they do the whole, when the shadow rise, so will the light. When blood is shed, blood will call. By the king's table for the order's might, for by our eternal's oath, the line is law. And that's their thing. And then boom, they start picking people. So Scion Skitterson pops up. And he's like, they're picking from the pages. And there are 5 pages. So it's Sydney, Greer, Blake, Vaughn, and Whitty. I haven't mentioned Sydney since the beginning. Or Blake. So we only really care about Greer and Whitty. Let's be real. Let's be really real here. I guess Vaughn too. So William pops up, and we all love William. And William is like, William Sitterson. I said Skitty? I really meant Sitterson. Anyway, he's the scion of Gawain, and he picks Whitty to be his squire. And Whitty agrees, and he accepted. And then we have Scion Herbert Hood, who is Pete, and he picks Taylor, which is Greer. He picks Greer, and Greer's like, yeah. I said Greer's name is Greer Taylor, so when I said Taylor, I was speaking his last name. But he picks Greer, and we're like, yes, Greer and Whitty, chosen. We love to see it. We love them. Our little like tiebreakers. And she she looks at Greer and she thinks to herself, time to break their rhythm. And it's so sweet. And then Nick gets up there and it's like, Scion of Arthur, you're going to pick your squire. And then Nick looks around and goes, I select Paige Matthews as my squire. With her agreement, we will be bonded for this war and beyond. And everyone starts screaming and yelling at her. And everyone's like, what's going on? And Cell is upset. And Bree's like thinking all this stuff. And she's like, thinking about what her mom said, that she's a choice between fight or flight. And she's like, I gotta take risks, follow my heart, and move forward. And she goes, I am my mother's daughter. And she looks at Nick and she's like, Scion Davis, I accept your offer. And there is a cacophony. People are yelling slurs. Vaughn's mom is ticked. And he literally, she calls him, Vaughn's mom calls Bree nappy headed. Like, oh my gosh, it was getting real. And Selwyn grabs her and like runs her out of the room and runs Nick. And she's like, I need to see Nick. And they're like hugging. And my trio, my golden trio, or should I say like ether trio? I'll figure this out later. I don't know. Y'all give me some ideas. They're so excited to have each other, and they're like hugging and they're spinning, and Nick and Bree kiss, and they're just excited they're gonna be bonded together. And Sel's just chilling, and then they get a knock on the door. Well, first Nick is like, hey, me and you, when I get called by Arthur, we are going to make things better for everybody. Like, Nick is a good guy, y'all. Anyway, so there's a knock on the door, and they're like, Nick, your dad wants to see you immediately. And they're like, no. And so then Nick leaves, and then Bree tells Cell, you need to go get Nick. I don't want to be here by myself. And so he's like, I'll be right back. And then she opens the door, and she comes face to face, eye to eye with Isaac. And he mesmers her immediately. Like, she's trying not to. You guys hear that snap? I've never made a snap that well in my life, and it's probably not even that good. Anyway, so he mesmers her, like, from the jump. It was bad. It was bad for our girl Bree. So when she comes through, she's tied to a chair in Lord Davis's study, and she's like, where's Nick? And y'all, we know Lord Davis was kind of giving like creepy, manipulative, like Southern pastor, like bad Southern pastor, like not the kind you'd actually want to listen to a sermon of Southern pastor. So we're like, ooh, what's gonna happen? So Nick, she's like, where's Nick? And he's like, oh, Nick is somewhere else. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't do a Southern accent. I know I'm from Georgia, but I cannot do a Southern drawl. Let me see. My apologies about the restraints. I can't do it. I feel like I sound like a bad Forrest Gump. Anyway, so he definitely abducts her, and he brings her in the room, and he's like, your kind. He basically goes on some racist tirade, and he's like, hey, do you not know about the Order's history? There was like a Black Knight, but he wasn't allowed around the round table because your kind aren't allowed here, basically. And yeah, he's super racist. So it was like, oof, why would you say that? And he's like, you don't belong here. And he's like, Nick's decided that I do. And then Mr. Davis is like, Nick doesn't see the grand vision of his ascension. He doesn't know the opportunity of Camlin. And she goes, you think war is an opportunity? And remember, Nick's dad had said earlier to Nick when his mom left that death was a gift. And remember that? And it's like, ooh, that's all coming back. And then he's like, Mr. Davis is like, all wars are opportunity, and I'm not going to let another one pass me by. And then Bree puts two and two together. She's like, oh, pass you? You mean you want... She was like, you wanted Camlin to come so that when you were a Scion, that Arthur would call you. And he's like, of course I did. He's like, you don't understand, like, the type of power that a Scion could have. Plus, he's like, the vassal families used to, like, basically worship them. But now... they all want things from him. And he's like, if Arthur had come when he would have controlled presidents. Like, this dude is evil, basically. He wanted the war. And he's like, and now there's women at the table. The Order of Rose used to be nice, and we were just supposed to be respect them, and like protect them. But now the Order of the Rose is at the wayside. And he's like, and with my son's foolishness of choosing you, he who sits at the crux of two faults. And he looks at her. Her two faults are her race and gender. Not only is she black, but she also has the audacity to be a woman. Like, OMG. Now, that's a problem. And he is sick of it. So then Bree puts another piece together. She's like, you opened the gates. You opened the gates those years ago when her mother was there. She doesn't say her mother because she realizes that Professor Davis hasn't put she realizes that Lord Davis hasn't put two and two together, that the woman that he had interviewed all the way back when was her mom, because she has her dad's last name. And he's like, oh, Isaac told me that he could tell that you and Selwyn were in my study. So she's like, I imagine you were there to figure out, so he could figure out his mole theory. But guess what? Guess who's the mole? Lord Davis is the mole. And he's like, it was a failed experiment. He said he thought if he caused the threat of Camlin, then Arthur would call him, but he realized later on that it wasn't the threat to once-borns. It was the threats to the Legendborn, to the scions themselves, that would cause the call of their ancestors, like that would cause the knights to awaken. So he had been attacking like them on purpose, and all of the different chapters too. And she was like, Sel was right, and he's like, we need to put Cain on a leash like his mom. And it was sick. So she was like, you brought the hounds and the Ukel to the Oath Night? And he's like, yeah. He's like, but I have to thank you because I didn't actually know Nick would be there, so it kind of is helpful. And it was sick. And he's like, now we only got 2 lines left to awaken. And she's like, you're putting your son at risk. And the dude's like, I'm helping my son. He's made for this war. He's a natural born leader. And she's like, a war that you're manufacturing because you're a freak. Like, so then he tells her, you need to, like, leave. And she's like, I'm not going to leave. Why would I do that? And then, boom, Isaac has Alice. And he drags Alice into the room. And Alice is, like, tied up and she's passed out because she's mesmered. And then he wakes Alice up so that she can be like, where am I? I'm scared. And Bree's like, don't touch her. And then she wakes up and she looks at Bree and she's like, Bree, what happened to your dress and your hair? What's going on? And then Isaac does this thing. And then she goes, Maddie, I know you don't have a dress for the gala. And he's slowly taking her memories away. And it's a show of power. Because, and the book literally says, a show of power, a reminder that no matter how much I know, I don't know enough to survive in this world and that she's not worthy. And she's like, please stop. Because by taking her memory, he's taking like every idea, every memory of laughter, all her conversations with her parents, and it's all going to be gone. And he can completely wipe Bree away from Alice's mind. He's that powerful. And he's like, yep, time for you to go. And then he's like, I need you to forget you ever found the Legendborn world, because we know Mesmer it didn't work on you, or it didn't take for that one reason. He's like, so you're going to forget. And she's like, what if I don't? And basically, I'm so sorry, Nick. I love you. Lord Davis goes all movie evil villain and is like, if you don't comply, I'll make sure Isaac will take you to an institutions. Will enjoy finding out why her brain doesn't work. Basically, like, we're going to experiment on you. And we'll attack Miss Chin, your dad, finding out about Patricia, all of that. And so then he goes, do you consent to this, officer? Basically parroting what his son had said to her earlier. And she goes, I do. And so they go all the way back to her house. And her mom is like, her grandmother then speaks. Her grandmother speaks. She'd been silent this whole time. And she speaks, the craft is a poison. I'm so sorry. And she's like, why couldn't you help me? Where'd you go? And she's like, I'm using all my power to call the old mother. I can't help you. And she's like, there's got to be something. And she's like, well, somebody can help you. And she's like, who? And so apparently her great-great-grandmother can help. So Jessie comes forward. And and she like basically controls, and she touches Alice, and she's like, she's like, there's no herbs. So she basically uses Bree's power, and Bree's power flames to life, and she heals Alice's mind. And she's like, oh my gosh. And Alice flips out, and she's like, he took my memories. What? And then she's like, Alice, I need you to breathe, and I gotta tell you everything. And so she tells Alice literally everything. And for Alice's credit, which, you know, I rarely do on this podcast, we tend to be anti-Alice here, even though this section, I'm no longer anti-Alice, I'm just medium anti-Alice. Alice takes it all in stride. And Bree's like, I have to go back. She's like, I need to find Nick. She's like, I don't know what's going on. Nobody's texting me. I need to go find Nick and I need to tell everybody what Lord Davis is doing with the demons. And then she thinks about her mother's box, and she thinks about how her mom called her brave all the time. And she's like, Alice is like, I'm coming with you, dude. Like, I'm not letting you do by yourself, because Alice is a G. She is a best friend. Like, that's a friend. So they definitely go back to the lodge, and they walk in, and it is a mess in there. And she finds William, and William's like, they told us you quit, but I wouldn't believe it. I knew for a second you weren't gonna leave us. Like, I knew. And then he's like, who's hurt? And then William, before he says anything, is like, who is this? This is Alice? Who is Alice? And he basically is like, you broke the oath of secrecy, and I'm wondering how you are still standing and not in pain. Because remember, the oath is like a magic bond to them. They break it, they might die. Like, something bad's going to happen to them. And she's like, I'll tell you later. So he's like, you need to come in. And then he says, everything's going crazy. Cell, Tor, and Sarah are off hunting some demon. Russ barely made it back in one piece. And Russ is like in some pain. We need to wait. Everything is going nuts, basically. So all of the people are like torn. And he looks at Felicity. He's like, Felicity, you're fourth rank. You're technically in charge right now, because Tor and Nick are here. So you got to tell us what to do. And before Felicity can even say anything, Bree's like, y'all, we got to find Lord Davis, because we need to find Nick. And then he tells them what's going on, and they're like, who is Alice? She's like, oh, she's a vassal, don't worry, she got the oath of secrecy. So they're like, we need to find Nick. And so they're like, last time we heard them, Nick was cussing out Lord Davis, and he went crazy because Lord Davis had told him Bree left. So then Lord Davis had taken Nick and was like, I don't want an audience, and they went away. And that's when stuff got really weird and started fight. And that's where the demons came. And he's been running all around trying to fight off these demons. And Bree's like, he will continue to, because do you know what's happening? And Felicity is like, Russ is wounded. Basically, it's all crazy now. It's all just a bunch of craziness. And then Whitty comes in, and Tor is like in pain. And Whitty is like, he's helping move his fingers, because remember, Whitty was chosen by William, and Selwyn has already bonded them. So Tor is bonded, Whitty is bonded, and so is Greer. They're all bonded now because Sel's done that. And remember what happens when Sel bonds people? That's super powerful magic, and he's kind of ether drunk while fighting demons. So stuff is going crazy, and they're like, this is Camlin. Camlin is happening. So he's like helping him up, like there are broken ribs everywhere. And she's like, there were hell cougars and foxes, and they were absorbing our ether and weakening our armor. We were cornered. It was crazy. So Sarah is like upset because Tor's hurt and everything is a problem. And so Bree is like, we got stuff to do. And then Bree finally explains, Davis wants Arthur to call Nick. And she's like, I don't think it's working. And then finally Russ asks, how is Lord Davis breaking his oath? Because you can't harm them. Like, it's an oath. And then William basically is like, oaths all mean like common commitments. If Lord Davis genuinely believes he's helping the order, then his oath won't fight back. So that's what's going on. So she asks William, she's like, could Nick hold Arthur off? And he's like, no, there have been scions who've been able to resist the call, but it's unheard of. And she's like, well, if anybody can fight him off, it's Nick. And And then Evan says, Nick is furious. He's angry and heroic and in love, and that's a formidable combination. He can fight off Arthur's call. And everyone's like, in love, and Bree's like, he's not in love with me anyway. So boom, Vaughn shows up, and they're all mad that Vaughn's here. They're like, why are you here? Like, we don't need that. We need to find them. And they're like, oh, they're probably underground. And she's like, where are the monsters going? And they're like, well, when they don't have a scent, they all go to the greatest source of ether. And they're like, what's that? And finally they're like, where's the greatest source of ether? And Felicity and Fitz all like get stressed out. And she's like, it's a bloodline secret, and she's like, we're sworn to not tell anybody. But Excalibur is on the ground, like as in the actual sword, like the sword that they use, and it's so powerful. It's such a powerful ether weapon. Like Merlin, the original Merlin, made it himself, and it doesn't dissipate. It just sits there. It's so strong. So they got to go to it, and so they're like, all right, let's go. And it's like, all right, let's go. So they're like, we need an entrance to the tunnels. And guess where the nearest entrance to the tunnel is? It's the Wall of Ages, like the literal Wall of Ages. So they all grab their weapons. Bree grabs a sword, and they go into the tunnel. So they go into the Wall of Ages, and they have to fight. And they're like, okay, we need to go. And then her grandma's like, oh, we're finally doing something. And she's like, Grandma, did you find the old mother? And she's like, I am not finding her. She's coming to you. And no, she ain't here yet, but she'll be here soon. So in order to open the tunnel, you need the 3 scions to do it. So the 3 scions that they have with them, scions of Lamorak, Gawain, and Bors, all open it. And they're like about to go in, and here comes Tor and Sarah. And they're like, Sarah, y'all are not allowed to go. And William's like, you need to get back to the hospital. I should have told Woody to put y'all to sleep. And she's like, I'm fine. You know I'm fine. I've got my science extra healing. And so Will's like, fine, you can go too, I guess. Like, he is not happy about it, but he knows there's nothing he can help her with, right? So, boom. She's leaving with them. And so they notice there are paths leading different ways, and there are 5 different ways. So they got to split up the group. William is not going underground. William is going to go, like, destroy some people. So there's an odd number. So Bree gets put into a group of 3 with Fitz and Evan, and then Vaughn and Whitty go join forces, and then the other bonded pairs go, while William is like looking over ground and stuff. And William keeps Alice with him, and she's like, and finally William grabs Bree and is like, you don't have to do this, it's not your war. And she's like, I don't want war, I want the people I love to be safe. And so Fitz like, are you coming, Matthews? And she's like, yeah, I'm coming. And so they're underground, and y'all, in the book things are ramping up, right? And they like gotta find their way. And everything's getting a bit creepy a little bit. And they're like searching for the tunnels. And Fitz is telling her, look, hug these walls. There are these giant stalagmite, like giant, like they're almost like spears. And they're coming up from the ground. And there's ravines. And they have to be all super careful. And then they hear a noise. And Evan's like, I think it might be bats. Audience, it was not bats. It was not bats. It was imps. So there are demons down here as well. And oh my goodness. Anyway, so they're fighting. They have to fight them off. And one of the imps, and then you have the grandmother in the back of the Bree's head, and she's praying. She's like, Lord, protect my grandchild, please. And she's like, doing the Lord is my shepherd, I will not fear not, even though I may walk in the battle evil. And Bree's like, be quiet, Grandma, please, go, be quiet. And she yells her, and she shoves her into the back room, and it's silent. And then all she sees is that one of the imps has grabbed Fitz and has taken him up in the air and drops him down into the ravine. And Bree starts screaming. And Fitz had been screaming. He's yelling, like, trying to get the imp to let him go. And the imp does let him go. And she looks, and Fitz is there. And his arms and limbs are loose. But his chest is pierced all the way through. And it's horrible. Awful. It's terrible. It's bad. It's bad, y'all. It's bad. Like, my feelings are hurt. Let's talk about that. My feelings are hurt. And Fitz is dead. And she's like, she's hurt, and his ether weapon has fallen to the ground. And Evan, who was chosen by Fitz, his ether weapon no longer exists either, because he's gone. And she's like, I don't know what it feels like to watch your sign fall right in front of you. She's like, did Evan feel Fitz's pain and his fear? And then she decides, she's like, I don't want any more deaths. This is Lord Davis's fault. He did this. People are dying. So she's like, we gotta go. And Evan hands her a flashlight, and they're walking. And she asks him, she's like, those are imps? E-cells? And he's like, yes. And then he goes, why weren't they invisible? Like, why were they full court? He's like, we're underground. Ether is richest closest to the earth. So he says, down here, every Shadowborn is more powerful than it is on the surface, and they're harder to kill. And she's like, that makes a lot of sense. And so he's like, so he tells her, watch the ground, the rocks are loose. And she is walking, and then it occurs to her, she's only hearing one set of footsteps. And what did Selwyn tell us? Shadowborn don't have footsteps. And that's when it occurs to her that Grouchels, I can't say it, Garuchels, this is me laughing to lighten up the dark turn this is taken, are consummate mimics, right? They can mimic everything you hear and everything you do. When it helps to facilitate the human ruse. And remember, Selwyn had thought that Bree was one. And this is where we get our Chekhov's gun moment. This whole time, Selwyn is thinking she's a Grushel, that she is this mimic, that she's actually Shadowborn. He's not paying attention that the real Shadowborn was Evan. And she is trying to make sure that Evan, fake Evan, doesn't realize that she has figured out what's going on. So she's trying, like, to walk and, like, keep pace. And then he's like, I'm good. Like, she falls, and she's like, I'm good. And he goes, Bree, you're a little too smart for your own good. And she starts running. She can't use her sword. Everything is flying. And she said, and she's like, why would you do that? And he's like, I honestly have to thank you. If you didn't show up tonight, I wouldn't have found the entrance to the tunnel that leads to Excalibur. He's like, I also have to help Davis, because he threw the King's Mage off his trail by opening all those gates, because Evan was also opening gates. So the mole was Davis, but the mole was also Evan. And poor Selwyn was just at a loss. And then he goes, did you know the real Evan Cooper played the banjo? She's like, do you know how hard it is to learn banjo? And she's like, he could kill me. Everything is going crazy. And it turns out his name is Roz. And he's like, and he's like, and she's being rude to him. She's like not trying to listen to him. And he's like, it's rude to ignore someone who's talking to you. He's like, Evan actually liked your attitude. Me, Roz, I don't like it. And she's like, I don't like murderers. And he's like, I didn't kill Fitz. I called the imps who killed him. Now, I did kill the real Evan. And I will say that when you guys are rereading it, see if you can almost tell where Evan is killed at. Maybe there's a change in his personality that you don't really pay much attention to because you're like, he's in the background. I feel really bad for Charlotte because her boyfriend is dead and has been a demon this whole time. So he killed Evan, and he pretended to be Fitz's squire. And mind you, Fitz and Evan are both dead. And he said he even copied Evan's humanity, and he took the warrior's oath as well. And he's like, it was awful. I wanted to kill everybody. And she's like, why? And Roz says, because I wanted to get at Nick. And Roz, once again, is the fake Evan. And he goes, did you know that if a fully awakened scion of Arthur dies, then the lines end forever? Like, that's how you end all the lines. You kill the fully awakened scion of Arthur. He's like, you kill the head, kill the body. He said it'd be easy if I could just get Arthur to call Nick like the others do. But he's like, the king is being real stubborn. And then he goes, and then here he was. He's planning to go after the dad. And then Nick is like, I want Bree as a squire. And he's like, that's when I realized he could do anything to keep Bree unharmed. So he needs Bree. He's like, he'd fight a horde of my demon comrades. He'd take up Excalibur. He'd expose Arthur. So he's like, I just got to take you, Bree. And so that's why I had to kill Fitz. And then he proceeds to say, my mistress, Morgaine, touch my nose, as in the line of Morgaine, would love to hear how he found the sign of Arthur's weakness. And he's like, she adores torture. And then in the back of her mind, her grandma's like, the cave is just 10 steps behind you, Bree. You just got to go 10 more steps. And she kicks Roz away from her. He goes flying to the ravine, and she uses some unknown strength. And we don't actually know where that came from. And she's like, oh, grandmother was right. And she limps into the ravine, and she sees everybody fighting. And in the middle of the ravine, there's this big, like, open area that's underground. Like, just imagine a big, like, gym? I don't know. In the middle of the ravine, on a small island that's surrounded by a bunch of black water, is Nick. And he is struggling to resist Arthur's call. Like, he is fighting back. And she sees Excalibur. And she jumps down, and she realizes her ankle isn't broken. And she looks at Felicity and Witty, and she's like, they're fighting off these bears or whatever. And Witty's like, I'm trying not to bring the whole thing down. And then he stops speaking. And she calls his name. She's like, Witty? And then she yells it again. And Roz has stuck his fist through Witty's back and grabbed his spine, and he yanked it out. And she's like, she looks at Witty, and he's dead. And she's like, no one saw Witty die but me. And she's like, and then Roz blames Bree for what happened. And so there's more fighting, and he's like, unless you can get Nick to accept the call, I'm gonna keep killing people. She's like, I'm killing everybody. And she's like, no. And he's like, have it your way. And Roz yells Nicholas's name. And he's like, if you kill her, I'll never touch Blaine. And then he turns around and he grabs Russ by the throat, and he lifts him up in the air and throws him into the wall. And Felicity, Russ is her boyfriend, remember that, she just starts screaming, and she tries to fight Roz, but they all grab her because they're like, you will die. And so Roz then picks up Bree, and he's like, Nick, you need to let Arthur call you or I'll break her. And then some daggers come at him, and boom, Selwyn comes out of nowhere. Well, mind you, it's not Selwyn, it is an owl. And then Bree realizes that Selwyn can shapeshift, because apparently Merlins all have different types of special powers, and one of Selwyn's is that he can shapeshift. I was shook. Obviously, Bree is shook. So he can shapeshift, and he kind of kicks Roz away. And Felicity is just sobbing. She goes to Russ's body, and she holds it. And so then Roz grabs Cell, and they're fighting. He like smacks Cell's head backwards, and he passes out. And then Nick is screaming, and it's the call of Arthur, and he's trying to hold it back, and Rod's like, you need to let it go. And then the words, though I may fall, I will not die, but call on blood to live. And there's a lot of chaos, and then Bree hears her grandmother say, she's here. And then Bree's like, who? And then her grandmother's like, the old mother. And then you see Nick has been called, and he grabs the handle of Excalibur, and he's pulling, and it's not moving. And Tor's shaking out. Lord Davis is freaking out. And you have Bree over in the back. And she had built like this house. And she said inside of her, the house blew apart. And time comes to a standstill. And she's standing, and everything's frozen. And she's in a single second of suspended time. And the old mother comes up to her and she goes, "What do you want to know?" And she's like, "Everything." And then the old mother is like, "Why?" And she's like, um, and she thinks of her mom, and she thinks of how her mom had to fight and had to triumph and all the pain, and how all that pain is also hers now too. And she's like, "Because her life counted, and I want to make sure her death counts." And then Vera looks at her and goes, "Then I will give you the power to do so while I'm tight with the truth." Okay, so then we get to this one part of the book. And the form of the book has changed. It's now reading like a poem. And I am going to read this. I'm going to read this straight from the book because I don't even want to summarize it. I'm just going to read it. A walk. Years passed. Years of pain. The history of my mother and her mother never knew. I see the oldest mother when she is young, standing in a field behind a great white home. She wears a plain white dress, or at least it was white at one time. Her hair is tied up, face like glowing mahogany, eyes like mine. The sun is low in the sky. She is tired. The day has been long. The days are always long. The angry screams of the master's wife can be heard across the field. They fight, the master and his wife. They fight about children, but they do not have any. Another day done. She begins to walk to the quarters where she hears a sound. A pale man with the hair of color of acorn slips into the yard through the black gate. She recognizes him, the man called Reynolds. A woman with flaxen hair comes out the back door to meet him, glancing behind her at every step, the master's wife. Reynolds pulls the master's wife to him until they are hidden behind the magnolia, its branches almost touching the earth. It's daylight, another day, another magnolia. She has stopped to rest underneath its boughs just for a moment of rest. The master appears. She is frightened, caught. He holds out a hand. "I'm not here to hurt you," he says. But he is. He hurts her anyway. The magnolia trees' fallen seed pods litter the ground. Their sharp edges dig into her back. 3 months later, the master's wife can be heard fighting from the orchard. My ancestor wonders, if a child between them could truly make it better. It wouldn't. But the next day, she feels one growing inside her anyway. When she shows, the master's wife notices, but doesn't seem to care. When she shows, the master notices, and he cares. He cares very much. He comes for her. He holds his weathered, soft face between her hard hands. His blue eyes stare into her brown ones. The other in the fields notice. He sees them over her head. "Tonight, Vera," he says roughly and releases her. He walks away. She knows this time he means to hurt her. She runs. There are paths to take, rumors of ways to go. She leaves as soon as the sun sets. She hopes she remembers the stories. She tells no one lest he comes for them too. He may come for them too. She takes nothing with her but a bit of fruit and sweet honeysuckle, nectar still in the stem. She runs for hours. Master Davis has the money for patty rollers, but she didn't expect to hear them so quick. The dogs bay in the distance. She splashes into a creek, doubles back, works upstream from the skirts held high, climbs a tree whose branches hang low. Her arms are strong. She works with the trunk, sends prayers to the roots, thanks the tree for help, drops down near 50 yards north of where she started. She settles into the dark shadow of the helping tree and spills out the fruit and the honeysuckle, crushed but still good. She sits cross-legged on the cool earth and draws a broken blade down her palm. The cut is deep, but it hurts less than the blisters on her feet. She is a memory walker, but tonight she does not want to walk. She wants to run. She smears her blood onto the fruit of the flowers, presses the mixture in her hand deep into the ground as they'll go, and calls the ancestors to aid in a rhythmic chant of her own making. "Protect us, please, all of you, everyone. Protect us so I can protect her. Help me see danger before it strikes. Help me resist their entrapment. Give us the strength to hide and to fight. Protect us, please, all of you, everyone. Protect me so I can protect her. Help me see the danger before it strikes. Help me resist their entrapment. Give us the strength to hide and to fight. Give us all we need to hide and to fight." They hear her. Their voices rise up from the earth, up through her wound and into her veins and directly into her soul. "Bound to your blood?" She gasps. The dogs are at the creek. Tears drop into the dirt. "Yes, please, bound to my blood." "A price," the voices sigh, sad and heavy. "One daughter at a time, for all time. Bind us to it," she cries. Her body trembles with a wave of desperation. an ocean of determination. She and the voices say the words together. And so it is. A molten core of red and black sparks to life in her chest, and it spreads through her limbs, burning her up in the inside. And she turns to me and sees me. Her eyes are volcanoes, blood-red fire streaming from the corners, power erupting over her skin. She wraps a hand tight around my wrist. This is your beginning. The old mother's walk, like Patricia's, is only the beginning. In the grip of her powers, I pass through 8 generations of women, her descendants, my foremothers. A stream of strong brown faces meet me, one life after the next, one life after another into a blur. Angry faces and sad ones, scared ones and lonely ones, proud ones and ones tired from sacrifice. Their faces, my faces, our faces. They show me each of their death, when the furnace of power in each mother's chest passed down to her daughter. Their resilience is bound to my flesh. I spin, twist, stumble onto the grass. I see my mother when she was young. She walks through campus. The light inside her shines bright, even through her heavy winter coat. A girl with smiling yellow eyes walks beside her. Snow sprinkles the girl's hair. As black waves hangs loose down her back. They turn together down a brick path, talking and laughing. I see my mother behind the wheel. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, watching her as she watches me. Our spirits meet in a blend of Vera's walk and my newfound gift. The car approaches. The accident. Just an accident. No one's fault. My mother wraps her hand around mine and squeezes. It comes for each of us, honey. Just when the car strikes, she presses her love against my heart and fades. I am myself, sitting in a hospital. The light in my chest is small, a flame only just lit. I revisit my own memory with my ancestors' eyes. Through her, I see my power, still new, simmering in my chest. The police officer's body shimmers like air over hot asphalt. The police officer and nurse brought me and my mother into a tiny green room. The mesmered memory returns in full. I see his badge, his shoulder wide as a door, and stubble on his chin. Bushy eyebrows, blue eyes. I blink, and the shimmer dissipates. The glamour drops. I see her old sweater, her narrow shoulders, the tears streaming down her chin. Black hair, like a raven, black brows, face too beautiful to be real, features both young and old. 2 golden eyes like cells fill me with deep sorrow. Not like cells. They are cells. Cell's mother's lowered lip trembles. She speaks through the pain. You won't remember this, but I want you to know. She was my friend. Blackness. Vera stands before me, bathed in blood and flame, hair stretching wide and loose like a live oak. Answers, but not an ending. Now that you have them, do you still want to fight? I don't hesitate. Yes. Then there is one final truth. A legacy forced, not given. A burden I did not carry. A question in her eyes. A choice. I'm ready. She reconsiders this, nods. Then I will release him and grant him voice. In a distance, a presence rises. From the threshold between worlds, he calls my name. All at once, I become we. We are in the cave again. We take one step, and we are already at the stone. We grasp the ancient hilt, warm under our fingers, and we pull Excalibur free. Y'all, just reading that, oh my God, I have tremors. I'm shaking. I have chills. I'm screaming. We'll get back to that. So anyway, she pulls Excalibur out of the stone. And people are mad. And on the swords, it says, take me up and cast me away. And in Excalibur's reflection, her eyes burn red. And she feels Vera's hands on her brow and ghostly lips on her forehead. And Lord Davis is like, no, stop her. And then inside me, and she says, inside me, Arthur is the only presence, and his possession is nothing like Vera or her grandmother's. And Arthur just starts speaking, and he's like, you're a traitor. I am your king, and you think you can rally your knights against me? Are you nuts? Like, he's like, are you crazy? You really think you're going to get away with this? Like, this is something that you think is going to happen. And Arthur looks right at Nick, and he goes, my brother Lancelot, my right hand, Camlin has come. And Arthur's eyes get really big, and Bree's kind of upset. And she's like, Nick was just called, and we'd all seen it. Because she said we'd all seen Nick collapse, and we'd seen him have to say the oath, the warrior's oath, and be awakened by his scion. But it wasn't Arthur. Because Bree is Arthur's scion. And Nick is Lancelot. So anyway, Raz is like, you're an abomination, we need to kill her. And Arthur's like controlling her and it's like, to me, my knights. And Bree's trying to fight him back. She's like, I don't want any more deaths. And they're basically in this turmoil. And Bree is like, and Arthur's like, dude, we're going to war. So they're fighting and all this stuff. And their ends are coming back. And then boom, her magic, her root comes out of her, and there are white flames, and she literally spits flame like a dragon. My girl is nuts. She's going crazy, and she's like, Arthur is super strong, and she didn't know how strong he would be, and he's fighting off a bear, y'all. Like, Mans is fighting off a bear. And Arthur is throwing her around, and then Cell wakes up, and Nick is in the air, and they're all just fighting, and her right arm hurts. And then Arthur's like, switch to Sinister. And she's like, I'm not left-handed. And he's like, you are now. And she tosses Excalibur over, and basically Arthur has like possessed her in a sense where he's fighting too. And then Roz is like, what are you? And then 3 intertwined voices speak, and they go, I am a medium, born from earth. I am blood crafted, born from resilience, and I am Arthur awakened. And Roz is like, it doesn't matter. The line of Morgana is rising, and Bree says, let her rise. We will rise against her. And Bree's like, it's too much. Excalibur, and she definitely kills Roz, and Roz dies, and she stands there with Excalibur raised. And then Arthur's like, has it been so long? Do you not kneel for your king? And Bree's in the back of her mind like, I don't want to do all this. But at this point, Arthur is still like not done. He needs to talk. It's not over. And she's like, we need to fight the monsters. Like, I don't want people bowing towards me. And she's like, she's trying to fight against Arthur's will, and it's not working. He's not going to yield. Not on this. He had seen Lord Davis's betrayal, and it was public, and he needs people to kneel at him. And she's like, don't move. And then finally he says out loud, the line is law. And Cell says it too. And people begin to kneel, and they all are saying lion's law. And Tor is not. She's like locked her legs, and Arthur is mad, and Bree's like, I don't care. I don't want her to kneel. And she turns to Nick, and she's like, please don't kneel. And Nick kneels. And he says the line is law. And she's like, no. And he's like, it's okay. And he kneels anyway. And then he goes, they that would be a leader, let them be the bridge. And he puts Excalibur back. And she tells them all to rise because Arthur has like rested. And she's like, y'all can rise now. I feel like I'm always sniffling in the mic. Y'all, I have allergies. Anyway, so she passes out. Because one thing about Bree, she's going to pass out. That's what she loves to do. So she definitely passes out, and she wakes up, and there's a note, and it's like, you collapsed, but then Cell carried you back, and it was all very dramatic. I hooked you up to some IV. Alice told me to make you some grits, and it was great, and Alice is all great. And then she starts to cry. She reads that note, and she starts crying, and she says she cries for her mother and for her people, and for the thread of death and violence forcibly woven into our blood, and the resistance that we had to grow to survive it. And she then says that, and she cries for herself. She cries for Fitz and Whitty and Russ and Evan, and for all the people that died. There were 4 deaths. And she cries for herself because she's like, she's not Nick. She wasn't the chosen one. And she says, I am the product of violence, and I'm the scion of Arthur, and I don't want to be either. I just want to be my mother's daughter and my father's. I just want to be me. And she's like, her lineages are bound together in an inextricable, horrible truth, and there's no way to untangle them from her destiny. And part of her thinks that part of the thing with Nick that she felt, the call and response, was Arthur and Lancelot, their bloodlines. Their bloodlines are like, have always been like together. And then somebody runs into her room, and she's like, where's Nick? And Cell is looking for her, and he's like, Nick is gone. They took Nick. They took him. So Nick has been kidnapped. And y'all know how I feel about my boy, man. Anyway, I'm being dramatic. I'm already like, I always get super emotional when I read part 4. So Lord Davis and Isaac are gone, and they've stolen Nick. And so it's like, I could feel if Nick was, life was being threatened. But he's like, that doesn't mean he's not safe. And they're like, why can't we find him? And Tor's like, we need to deal with this now. And they're like, why didn't they just steal Bree? That's what Felicity says. And like, Felicity is so hurt. She can't even deal because, Russ is gone. Her boyfriend, she loved him. And she goes, why didn't Isaac take Bree and control Arthur? And then Sel's like, because an awakened scion of Arthur can't be in control, and he doesn't understand her or her powers. It's too dangerous and risky. And then William walks in and is like, yo, are you a medium? And he asks her, like, what's that about? And she's like, so, yeah, I'm a medium and a blood crafter who can generate my own ether. And he's like, that's handy. The medium a bit explains why Arthur can possess you, because I've never heard of the Pendragon speaking directly until you. And then Sel's like, of course you never heard of it. It's never happened, William. And he's like, there's no time. And William's like, this is the time when we talk about this. We can't save Nick right now. We need to talk. The Lynamore game is awaking. The awakening scion of Lancelot is back. And we need the table to gather. And the reason they stole Nick is so the table can't gather. So if Nick's not around, the full table can't gather together. So he's like, well, then William's like, we need to understand the scion that we have. So he's like, Bree, my theory is that Arthur will inhabit you in ways we've never seen. Not just his abilities, but his spirit, his emotions, and probably his memories. So things we can look forward to in the next book. Anyway. So then finally Greer is like, I don't get why Nick is Lancelot's scion and Bree is Arthur. And William was like, well, we need you to explain some things. You kept mentioning of Vera, and I didn't ask you who she is. You need to tell us, like, fill us in. And she's like, well, Vera is my ancestor, and she was enslaved on the scion of Arthur's plantation. And he lived next door to Scion Davis's plantation. And William's like, hey, what's that? What did you say those names? It's like Davis and Reynolds. And so William pulls out this book of the column of names, and he's like, yes, the Reynolds are of the line of Lancelot, and Davis is obviously where we get Nick from, the scion of Arthur. And it turns out that so she had seen Reynolds cheating with the scion Davis back in the plantation days wife. They had no other children, so she passed off the baby that she had with Reynolds as the scion of Arthur. And so she passed that off, and there was really nothing they could do about it because they wouldn't tell. And that Samuel Davis was a slave owner, and he knows what would have happened if he had had a child with one of his slaves, and he did it anyway because he's a terrible person. So Davis knew if Vera had his child, the child would be a scion. And if there was ever a silver chance that she was carrying his child, he would have hunted her down. And because she survived and gave birth to a scion, their whole family, Bree's whole family, is a splinter in the line, in the wall of ages that they didn't know about. So the blood of Arthur has been running in her family's veins for centuries, for generations. And the thing is, they're the only splinter in the line because there was no other, the Davis family was it, and they're the only descendants of the Davis family. Nick is not a Davis. Nick is actually a Reynolds. And so he's actually in the Lancelot line, which is, so Nick's ancestor a generation back was the scion of Lancelot. But there were also other Reynolds that were born. So the person that they thought was Lancelot at the other chapter he's also a scion of Lancelot, but would have been dormant because he's not the oldest. Nick is the oldest, and he's the most eligible. So she's like, the only way the northern chapter won't be called is if Nick dies. So she was like, his whole, everything Nick has known about his life, the fact that he lost his mom because of Arthur, it's kind of nothing. He was never the scion of Arthur. But no one would have ever known because the last time Arthur was called was before the Civil War. So she's like, everything between me and Nick, she wonders how much of it was Nick and how much of it was Arthur and Lancelot call and response, a king to his first knight, tied together by the deep bonds of loyalty and betrayal. And William's like, it's kind of funny because it's basically the Arthur, Lancelot, Guinevere story all over again. So So then Tor comes in and it's like, she's like, guess what? I called Regents. And Cell's like, why would you do that? She's like, I had to. I'm in charge. I'm the third ranked. I'm in charge. And she's like, actually, you don't get to make those. Cell's like, you don't get to make those calls, Tor. Bree is your king. And she's like, and Tor's like, by accident, this was a mistake. And then Bree's like, accident, and she's ticked off. And then Alice gets up and she's like, you think 300 years of chattel slavery is an accident? Like, you're saying that's an accident? And basically, I'm like, Alice, get her. And then Bree and Tor's like, you know what I mean? And Bree's like, I don't think I do. Because let me tell you, what that man did was not an accident. He knew exactly what he was doing. He liked owning her life, her body, and he wasn't the only one. And she wasn't the only one. And she's about to fight her. And she's like, you know what? Will the other Legendborn be able to stop me? Especially with Arthur's strength? And they're like, nope. Anyway. So basically, they got to put Tor in her place. And she's like, Tor, Bree is your king. And Tor's like, not my king. Not when she doesn't even want to be. And then Alice is like, sign of Tristan, right? Bree doesn't have a choice. As far as I can tell, you don't have a choice because you're the third rank. And so Tor tries to fight Alice. And they grab her and they basically make her back off. And William was like, you need to calm down. So basically, all we know is that now a bunch of people have to pick new squires. And Bree's got to select a squire. And she knows she'll have to share Vera's story again. And then somebody asks, she's like, well, Bree asks, what if the line of Morgaine and the Shadowborns are working together and they get to Nick before we can get to Nick? And they're like, what are they going to do with him? And then she finally is like, I need to go for a walk. And Cell comes because she kept a little bit of the story apart. And she tells Cell, she's like, your mom was there and our moms were friends. And he's like, what? I thought she was locked up because she was succumbing to her blood. And then Bree's like, what if you don't have to succumb to your blood? What if the order was lying? And she's like, your mother was lucid and focused and totally in control. And she's like, but what does that mean? And so I was like, that means they could have been locking us away for things that, and she's like, that's dangerous knowledge. We can't say that. And she's like, I know it's dangerous, but it could be true. And she feels Cell's attention, and Cell's like, listen, you are my king now. First of all, I screamed. And he says, you are my king now, Cariad, or Cariad, whatever, it's Welsh. It means like sweetheart or something. And she doesn't know what it means, and she doesn't want to know what it means. And then she looks at him, and he's like, your oath to Nick. You have to help Nick. And he's like, Camelin has come, we're at war, and you need a Merlin. And she's like, I know I need a King's Mage, because she's the most important player on the board. Her life is tied to all the lines, and she's awakened. So, like, if they kill her, it's over. And she hears Arthur in her head, and he goes, we will face the shadows. We always have. And then she hears Vera say, there is a cost to being a legend, but fear not, you will not bear it alone. And then she looks at Cell and is like, can we get out of here? And they go to the quarry, and she thinks of all this stuff that's happened to her, and she's like, she can feel that Nick is gone. And she's like, she loves him. Like, she admits to herself that she loves him. And she's like, Nick is in my heart and I'm in his. This is irrefutable, no matter how it happened or when or why. And I won't lose someone that I love again, not when I have the power to save them. She goes, unspeakable evil gave me Arthur. Vera's resistance gave me power, but I earned my will. And then she's like, the order is my court. We got stuff to do. And she's terrified. And she's like, but I'm not alone. And that's good. And she looks at Cell, and they're at the quarry where this all started. And she takes off her shoes, and she goes, there's no more before, and there's no more after. There is only now. And she sprints, and she jumps off the quarry and into the water below. And that is the end of book 1 in the Legendborn saga. I know I just started whispering, but y'all, part 4 is insane. On next week's episode, we'll be doing a full recap, a full end of the book, talking. We may or may not have guests. It really depends on if I can organize, if some people from my book club want to come and just tell me what they thought about different things and their favorite parts. But yeah, that's Legendborn. Thank you for coming with me on this journey as we talk about it. We will wrap up our journey next week, and it will also be the end of the year. Start giving me ideas of what book you want to hear from next. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. It was a very fun time for me. And thank you once again for joining me. If you would like to follow me, you can find me on Instagram and on YouTube at Exquisite Williams. And you can follow me on Twitter at Exquisite WILL. Remember to follow the podcast at Our Moment Pod. Once again, thank you for listening to the ad at the beginning. If you did, if you skipped it, go back and listen to it, please. And thank y'all for joining me. Also, if y'all could see my copy of Legendborn that I use for this, it's so bent up and folded pages and just well loved and written in, and it's a special book to me. And I'm really happy that I got to share it. I love to hear all of y'all's opinions. And next week we'll do our final wrap up. And I really can't believe this is over. What? 12 episodes of just Legendborn? Mind you, I thought it would be silly goofy of me. There are 13 lines, and I was like, what if I do 13 dedicated episodes of Legendborn? But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Once again, thank you so much for listening to me. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. Save the episode, share, do word of mouth. That will really help the Our Moment podcast grow. And yes, have a really beautiful day and a very good Christmas. I hope you get all that you wish for and more. I will talk to you all next week. Bye.